For those of you that don't know me, I am Debra Boggs, CEO of DNS Executive Career Management. So a little bit about our firm. DNS Executive Career Management works with the VP, C-level, and board-level leaders to prepare for and navigate your high-level search. So we're not a search firm. We don't do placements, but we say we're like the home stagers to make a luxury property look expensive before it goes on the market, right? We're working on positioning board candidates for that search, board level resumes, bios, LinkedIn profiles, your unique value proposition as a board candidate to stand out amongst your peers. And then the search process, introductions to recruiters, kind of the whole gamut end to end. And so we also offer executive outplacement services for companies with senior leaders in transition, but that's not the focus of our talk today. Today, we're really going to dig into the board seat process. And so what makes someone board ready? Well, what we know from the research that we have done on interviewing dozens of board level recruiters, board leaders, and leaders in the industry around board readiness, we know that typically a C-level title is required to be able to get that board seat. So sometimes people are thinking about board work and they think about, okay, there's some career management pieces that need to happen first to then be board ready, right? To be qualified for a board seat. Either that, or there's going to be a deep functional or deep industry expertise in a way that that you wouldn't get from someone with maybe more general experience. And so, if you work for, say, Meta, there's only a few C-level titles, right? But a higher level title with really deep functional or industry expertise will still work. And so it's not a hard and fast rule, but it is helpful. The other piece is we need to think about board governance and corporate governance a little bit differently. So a lot of people sometimes have that C-level title. They've got some interesting things in their background. Some of those things include global work, managing a company through an exit or merger, divestiture, some sort of an event, an IPO, things like that. Maybe you're a specialist in helping pre-seed companies, scale and get to the next level round of funding, fundraising expertise, things like this. Or some governance expertise, right? So how do you get corporate governance expertise if you haven't sat on a board, right? And there are a lot of programs out there that are helpful in learning the language around corporate governance. And it just kind of shows that you're ready to sit at the table. I'm not in any way saying that a certification program is required. That is not my point. But maybe taking a couple of courses, there's an unending amount of courses on corporate governance, everyone from nonprofit organizations to the Ivy League schools to NACD, all of these, there's a ton of options. We like Private Directors Association courses because, to be honest, they're really high quality and they're very low cost for around corporate governance. But there's also, like I said, all the Ivy League schools have them. I know Harvard's program is excellent. You come out with a great network. So there's a lot of different options, but that's a great way to cover a gap, if you have one, in your understanding of corporate governance. Now, one more piece I'll say is for those of you in the room that are CHROs or general counsel or chief legal officers, this one's harder because there's typically only one seat on a board for a legal leader and sometimes not a seat on the board for specifically an HR leader. And so you need to think about what else you bring to the table, what other unique value you have that's not just people leadership or legal leadership. So in our research of interviewing board level recruiters, nominating committees, things like that, we compiled a list of the board specific skills that we saw come up most often because we realized that there's not a lot of information out there about best practices for board candidates. And so that's one of the things we compiled. So I have a slide on that I don't have ready to show you right this second, but if you pop your email in the chat, I'll make sure that you get it after I know we didn't cover this in detail, but I do in every single other video we've ever done, so I can bear you an advice on being clear about your unique opportunity for board seats, right? Where you're uniquely equipped to serve, building out your list of skills and your accomplishment stories. Where do we put them? Based on our research, we get a lot of questions about, do I need a board resume? Do I need a board bio? Do I need both? Like, what does this look like? And the answer actually is both, because some board level recruiters will ask for the resume, some ask for a bio, and some do ask for both. And so for our candidates that we work with that are starting a serious search for a board seat, we advise that you have both on hand so that you're ready in case of however they ask for it, right? That we have something well crafted, well done, well thought out, ready on hand when someone asks and not have to slam something together over the weekend. So in your board level resume, it's going to be very similar to your executive resume, except there's going to be some differences. I do a whole other webinar on exactly what a board resume should look like and the differences, but at a high level, it's going to be shorter. It's going to focus on your board specific skills. It's going to focus on your highest level achievements and accomplishments and not get into the tactical details. It's going to have a photo. For most of you that are comfortable adding a photo, even in the US, a photo is expected on a board level document. And it's going to include your board adjacent work. And what I mean by that is if you haven't had a board seat yet, include all the work around maybe reporting to the board or presenting to the board or preparing materials for the board or being a liaison or sitting on a committee. Things like that will show that you have an understanding of board governance and that you can sit at the table. Other things to include are things like your executive committee leadership, showing that you are on the governing body of the strategy about the whole company, right? Or showing that you've been in any kind of company-wide committees. Anything like that will help show your board readiness. So that's in the board resume. The board bio is going to be similar, but it's going to be a narrative, right? So that board resume is going to be like a resume, typically 1 to 2 pages. Board resumes can still be 2 pages. It's just not going to have a ton of deep detail. And then your board bio is going to be a 1-page narrative in paragraph form of your career. It can be saying and it should be saying the exact same unique value proposition, background of your career, your board readiness, your board adjacent work, all of these things, but it's going to be narrative form, have your photo. It's nice to have them look like a package of documents, have them look similar font, all of these things. Because we need to remember, too, we are competing against the absolute best in our industry. We need to bring our A game. In your own company, you are the top, right? But in the wider marketplace, you're one of many. Let's talk LinkedIn profile for a second. We need to be updating our LinkedIn profiles, refreshing them, and focusing them in board work, right? So that means weaving those board-specific skills and accomplishments throughout. It means adding maybe board advisor, board candidate, something like that to your headline. It means having a refreshed, updated, professionally done headshot. You need to be having these for your documents anyway. So if you're going to have them for your documents, it's great to add it to LinkedIn, but having a up-to-date headshot that looks like you if you were to walk into an interview right this second with the full board is incredibly important. So LinkedIn, and then rethink about all of the experience in your LinkedIn and whether it's telling the story of what you're qualified to do next and not everything you've ever done. And actually, I caught myself in this situation last week. I had a virtual coffee with someone, and they had dug so far back into my LinkedIn profile, into my experience section, that I felt like I was having to answer for things I did 20 years ago that have nothing to do with my job now. And it took the focus away from where I wanted to be focusing, which is my expertise today. And instead, I was trying to explain why I had this role in higher ed 20 years ago. It was a great reminder for me that I needed to go through and take some things out that no longer are part of my story today. And I'd love for you all to think about that too. What needs to be refreshed in your own story, or what is taking away from the leader you are today and the leader you could be tomorrow, and focusing on what maybe you had been in the past. So that's my soapbox, but it was a very awkward conversation last week. So I'd love to spare you all from that. So what we see a lot of times in a board document, a board resume, a board bio from someone, they send it to us and it says, seasoned executive with 25 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry driving growth with a proven record of results. That is table stakes, friends. That is just what you need to have to walk in the door. That is not setting you apart. You know, being a seasoned executive, having decades of experience in your industry, and having a reputation for delivering results is absolutely just minimum viable product for getting in the door, right? And so what are we doing instead? And we need to think about, and the way I want you to frame it is, what are the boards you're most uniquely equipped to serve on, right? And that means what kind of an industry, size of company, stage of company, ownership structure. Get a really clear picture of who you're uniquely equipped to serve. And then what are the challenges for those companies right now? What's going on for them in the market? What's going on for them internally? What's happening in an economic level for them? And how are you uniquely equipped to help them solve for those biggest challenges? Your unique value is not that you have decades of experience in your industry. Your unique value is that you've seen around the corners and can help companies solve for their biggest challenge. And that's what we want you to focus on. For anyone who currently sits on a board too, we'd love your thoughts on how that came about. What we most often hear from people is that it was, a friend of a friend in the industry knew that there was a board seat open, things like that, and that something came out of that conversation. And yes, ask what that time commitment looks like. Ask what the committee commitment is going to look like. Because it's not just the once a month or once a quarter board meetings, but it's the meeting time in committees, how many committees you're going to be required to serve on. Things like that are important to know going into it, just to know what you're getting into. And here's another question I get all the time is, because we work with executive leaders through their job search process too, or with corporate outplacement where they're transitioning out of a company and they're thinking about what's next. A lot of people are open to another executive career role and or a board seat. And they say, okay, well, what should I do next? And the answer is really what we suggest is if you're going through a job search, the executive job search is different and it requires a ton of time. And so we always require to our candidates or suggest that they focus on the job search first, because number one, both of these searches take time and effort, and you typically need a paycheck. And so let's focus on the job search first. There are also different searches because, again, your skills, your audience, all of these things are going to be different. And so focus on the job search. And then third, the reason is if on the off chance you do get a board seat before you get your career role, it's likely going to be in your industry. And then when you do land your job, you may have a conflict of interest and you may have to step down. And that's never a good look for anybody. Now, let's talk a little bit about timing. I think, all of you on this call are definitely prepping well ahead of when it's needed. What is hard is when people call us and say, hey, I retired from my C-level job, 6 months ago, and I'm really starting to think about board work. That's hard because the search for a board seat, for your first board seat, not for every board seat, just the first one, can take a lot of time. And so backing into getting board ready, clearing up any skills gaps or, education gaps or anything you need to firm up, building your board documents, and then starting your interview and networking and all of that can take a lot of time. And so give yourself some space to really build into that board portfolio work. And so it can take, a year, 2 years to land that first board seat. It may not. You may have a strong network already, but to build and activate that network and then have, be in the right place at the right time can take some time. And so really, give yourself some space and don't think after 2 months you don't have a board seat, so it's never going to happen. That comes back to having that unique value proposition, but also having the really clear picture of your search. And this goes for anyone in a career search too. Letting people know you're open to what you're open to and giving them a very clear picture of what you're looking for. So, hey, I'm starting my search for a board seat where I could really add value to a company like XYZ in the, ABC industry because of my experience doing, MNOP. That way they have a very clear picture, because otherwise, there's one of two things we get. It is someone that reaches out and says, hey, I'm open for my next opportunity. Please keep me in mind if anything comes up. And I'm like, open for what? I don't know. I'm not going to read your resume. I don't know you. Why would I spend this time? Or I'm open for my next opportunity, and here is my entire life story, and I'm going to scroll and scroll and scroll, and I'm still reading their bio. No one's reading that either. Giving really short, concise how people can help you, and people will then, be able to open doors for you, and they'll have more information about how they can be supportive. And then thinking about, it's not just activating your current network, but building a network. We work with a lot of people that have really excellent networks internally, maybe in their large organization, but you've been heads down, you've been working, you've been building your career. You don't have an external network that can open doors for you. And so we need to think about what rooms, virtually or in person, do you need to be in? Who do you need to meet? And what does that follow-up with them look like? And typically I like to send a link to do a virtual coffee. You'll be shocked at how many people you meet virtually or live that when you invite them to a virtual coffee, they actually do it. If you have a link, it's easy. You can have a conversation and then you can start building from there. I was talking to a former chief yesterday who is launching a coaching business, and she's about a year into it. So, she's got an idea of what she delivers. She's kind of in that growth stage now. And I said, feel free to reach out to me. I was where you were 8 years ago, and I have already made all the mistakes. So I'm happy to help you see around corners. I've made every mistake you can think of. So I'm happy to help you avoid some of those things. And I think that's, definitely a piece of it, right? As founders are open to that. And that's why getting an advisory seat is easier, because you're providing something incredibly valuable. So what about those of us with full-time consulting or fractional businesses that you've built based on significant career experience? So yes, it is definitely possible. This is where you're going to want to start at the advisory level most often, and maybe even negotiate with your current clients to add, advisor to the founder or something as part of your scope of work. And that way it can be something we can start adding to your resume. But I think, if you are a fractional C-level leader because of your career experience, that's fine. In fact, it just means that you have more time and flexibility in your schedule to be a board leader. And so I think it still just goes back to focusing on those board specific skills and accomplishments. And because in your board resume, it's going to start with your, career summary, your board specific skills and experiences, and your board work and your board adjacent work before you get to your career chronological experience, right? And so this is good news for you or anyone who's a fractional leader right now, because that's not the first thing that people are going to see. It's actually one of the last things they're going to see. So that's not a problem. But be sure, if you're a consultant, and this is for anyone in a board search or a career search, if you are a consultant, if you are a fractional leader, it is absolutely vital in that experience section not to say I'm a consultant for these kinds of companies helping with these kinds of problems, because that looks fake. So many people are trying to cover up career gaps that they're putting fake consulting roles, and they're not doing anything. So if you're doing meaningful work for actual companies, list those out. So, you can have your consulting company and then say, working on engagements like, and then have the company name or the type of company or the size and industry, to give it some context if you can't share names, and then say what you were engaged to do and how you drove results, right? I don't know of anyone who has been successful to land a board seat through the paid marketplaces. Not saying they're not legitimate. I don't know of anyone who's been successful. Now, there are some organizations that are doing a marketplace type structure, but they're nonprofit, and it's based more on, just really trying to move the needle. And so one that we're actually partners with is Board Ready. They're based in Seattle, and they are really primarily a group of, trying to bring board ready women and diverse populations to one marketplace. There's no charge for this, and they're bringing companies in to say, okay, now you have a group of qualified people ready to sit on boards and be kind of that clearinghouse for that. So if anyone's interested in an introduction to Board Ready, let us know. Happy to make an introduction to their leadership to be in their platform. Again, if you're going to be in their platform, you really need to bring your A game, have your documents, be ready. But we're happy to make introductions to Board Ready. They're doing really amazing work in that space. Mm-hmm. And same thing with the New York Stock Exchange. They have a platform. They have a market, like a kind of a marketplace. But to be in their group, you have to be nominated by a current CEO of NYSE listed company. So there is a barrier to that one. But if anyone meets that criteria, please let us know and be happy to introduce you to the New York Stock Exchange as well. How do you access the startups as a board seat? So here's what I would suggest. I have a video happy to share on how to use Crunchbase data to build lists of companies. And then it includes then their contact information for their senior leadership. What I would do is, once you know your ideal focus for your board seats, then building lists of companies that fit that criteria and literally reaching out to the founders or the CEOs. This is going to be kind of a cold reach out. It could be a warm reach out if you know someone who knows someone there, right? You can think about it like a job search, but it's really going to be getting in front of the people that need the advisory support, right? It's going to be early stage. In this video, it'll show how to build lists of companies, maybe at pre-seed stage, seed stage. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Maybe they just got their latest round of funding, and you can reach out and say, I'm an expert in helping companies scale. I'd be happy to be an advisor, because the founder can decide, do they want a formal board advisory, function? They may have a whole team. They may just bring on specific advisors, and it's really something that's going to be personal to the founder or CEO. The thing about an advisory seat is it doesn't have to be with a prestigious company. What we want to show is it's a stepping stone for you to paid board work. And what we want to really show in here is that a founder of a company that we're assuming makes some kind of money felt that your advisory work as a strategic leader was valuable, right? That's all we're trying to show. We don't need someone who's going to be a unicorn. We don't need someone in the news all the time. We just need to show that your advisory work as a strategic leader is valuable to some founder or CEO somewhere. Also, we're going to touch a little bit on this, and it's a very uncomfortable topic, but I'm going to wade into this anyway. DEI used to be in my list of valuable board skills, and I have taken it out in recent months-ish. If you are a DEI leader, we need to be thinking about how to position you as a business leader as well. Now, I'm not saying strip it out of everything you've ever done and totally change your identity. That's not my point. But unfortunately, DEI leadership is no longer a valued board skill for most organizations. And so if that's what you're leading with, you're most often going to get pushed to the bottom of the pile. So can we talk about something for a second? Any of you in executive job search right now? The CMO search is the hardest search in the market right now. And I don't know why. The search for CMO is incredibly hard right now. So if you're in a job search, let's absolutely talk about that, because you got to bring your A+++ game. Not impossible, but harder. Same with communications. The good thing about communications officers are, especially if you do internal, you understand the 360 degree of the business because you're digging into everybody's stuff. And that's where you can really be of value, is really understanding the full focus of the business. And if communications is done well, then you're also the right hand typically to the C-level leadership team, and that's helpful as well. But I would love to know in the chat, what tips resonated with you today? What do you feel like is going to help you in your board search? I would love to know what resonates with everyone, or what tip was meant for you today, because that helps us when we're building content in the future.